Welcome back to Breakdown, SEC versus the Big Ten, where we evaluate the continuing efforts of the Big Ten and SEC schools as they struggle to climb to the top of the ladder and become and/or remain the alpha dog conference of the collegiate sports world. My name is Joe McClure. It's April 13th, and with me is...
The other Joe McClure. You can call me JJ.
All right. Today we're going to focus on a review of the basketball championship, even though there were no SEC nor Big Ten schools involved. And after that, we're going to talk about the transfer portal. So to start with, JJ, give me your evaluation or analysis of the Final Four.
The Final Four was interesting. There was all of one good game, I thought.
Okay.
That was UCLA Gonzaga, the game that was won in a banked in overtime buzzer beater by Jalen Suggs. That was a game for the ages. I mean, everyone was playing high quality basketball. I think both teams shot over 55% from the field. Both teams were making tough shots. That was one of the best games I've seen all season.
Had Suggs not gotten into early foul trouble, would there be an overtime in your mind?
I don't remember him getting in early foul trouble.
Am I
I remember that in Baylor. I remember that in the Baylor game, but not in the UCLA game.
Okay, my bad then. You're right. My bad. So I retract that statement.
But yeah, that was a really good game. What did you think about it?
It was way better than I had expected. I'm not convinced that the better team won that game, but the team that scored the most points obviously won. It was a very good game. The other games, lopsided.
Yeah, my pessimism for Houston manifested itself against Baylor, but then again, maybe that wasn't an indictment on Houston so much as it was a feather in Baylor's cap, because what they did to Houston is exactly what they did to Gonzaga in the next game.
Yes. When will Gonzaga win the national championship? They've come close a few times. They played Duke, lost in a close game, although this one was not a close game. When will they actually get over that mountaintop? Do you see that in their future?
Well, I believe they're one of the three favorites in Vegas going into next season to win it in 2022. So
Okay.
It could be next year. It could be this time next year. We're talking about how they are covered in confetti. They landed I'm not sure if it's been official or not, but I know the number one player in the country, Chet Holmgren from Minnesota, is a heavy lean to Gonzaga. If he has not already selected them, he will be there.
Minnesota, that's where Mr. Suggs came from.
It's a pipeline, I guess.
To Gonzaga. Any other thing, JJ, regarding the Final Four that you want to discuss?
I would say, as it pertains to the SEC and the Big Ten, I guess the SEC gets that point in their favor because Davion Mitchell was an Auburn transfer, so he has SEC roots.
Yes.
But then again, he did beat another SEC transfer in Andrew Nimhard, so maybe it's a wash. I don't know.
For those two conferences, I would call it a wash.
But I don't think the Big Ten even had any transfers, playing in that game. So
I don't either. Speaking of transfers, let's segue into the transfer portal. Before we get there, though, I want to ask you a question regarding professional sports.
Mm-hmm.
To you, is free agency in professional sports a good thing?
It is a great thing if you love the sport itself. If you root for a team more so than a sport, it can be a frustrating thing. It's amazing to have the autonomy and the players have all of the rights that the owners get, but it depends on your perspective.
I like that answer. I like that answer. It can be frustrating for fans and for coaches as well. But if you love the game, it's a great thing. Well, let me ask you this. Tell me what the college basketball transfer portal is. What is that?
It's just where players go when they've decided to leave the school that they're at.
Okay, for a simple answer, I'll take
How
that.
would you define it, the transfer portal?
It gives players an opportunity to move from one school to another school. An opportunity today, at once upon a time, they did not have those opportunities. There was once upon a time when coaches or schools could deny a transfer just because they could. These are a lot of decisions to go to a school or university is made when a man, woman, whomever is young. I'm gonna say 17, 18 years old. They making these decisions that's going to impact their lives for 4 years. And once upon a time, they were basically stuck with that decision, but the coaches who recruited them could come and go as they please. The transfer portal has leveled the playing field a little bit, so to speak. So, with that being said, do you think the transfer portal will make basketball more competitive?
I would have to say I doubt it. I think good winning players like playing with other good winning players. I think
Is that the case now?
I believe it is the case now. I mean, look at Baylor. They had a sea of transfers. Davion Mitchell, they're transferred from Auburn. Maceo Teague transferred from Presbyterian. Jared Butler transferred from Alabama. I mean, those are their three best players.
I understand. I hit. So it will not make it more competitive. What will the transfer portal do for the sport? Will it be positive, negative, or neutral?
Yes. It will be positive, negative, and neutral, depending on your perspective, depending on what you root for. Whoever adapts to it earliest, I think, has the advantage. It's a new variable.
I agree with you completely. Whoever adapts to it earlier will have an advantage. What are some advantages that the transfer portal provide for coaches?
Well, it provides coaches the opportunity to improve their team. It gives them access to players that they didn't have.
Okay.
From certain states that have a surplus of talent, you're never done recruiting for a player. For some coaches, like if you're in California and you're at UCLA, just because a guy commits to Kentucky, let's say his name is Johnny Juzang, that doesn't mean you would stop recruiting him necessarily.
Good point.
I mean, you never know who gets homesick, who's going to want to, return closer to their friends and family. It just gives an opportunity for those specific coaches in basketball rich states to access players that they thought they missed out on.
With the transfer portal, coaches no longer need to build a program from the ground up, meaning strictly from recruiting high school students. They can dab into all kind of markets these days and easily get a player who will come in and most likely be eligible the very next year because the NCAA legislation is expected to be passed that will ensure all first-time transfers will have immediate eligibility. That has not always been the case. Sometimes the NCAA would let one guy get immediate eligibility and another guy would not have such immediate eligibility. And to my mind, it was always trying to figure out why, and I never was able to consistently figure out why they were doing that. Another thing about the transfer portal is that it presents a different style of recruiting for coaches. Some coaches dislike recruiting high school athletes. Now they will be recruiting slightly older, more mature athlete in those that involved in the transfer portal. Well, let me ask you this, JJ. What are some advantages that the transfer portal provide for athletes? Some advantages.
Oh, well, I think the biggest advantage is the opportunity, to play consistently, get more minutes, the opportunity and exposure, the ability to develop, play a role and not just sit the bench and be a practice player.
Okay.
I think that's like the biggest obvious advantage. But it also gives the players a bit of autonomy and power. And in that I mean, like, there will be no more Bob Knights. You can't be a draconian taskmaster. Not when someone can just leave in the blink of an eye. There won't be any more Greg Marshalls.
And not that we have anything against Bob Knight. I'm just kidding there.
Well, some of us don't. I'm not the biggest fan, but
but I understand what you're saying. And that's true. If you were an athlete, would you rather play under pre-transfer portal or under the current transfer portal rules?
I'd want to play under the current transfer portal rules. I mean, every other student that's not an athlete gets the opportunity to transfer without having to sit out a year for academics or whatever. So
Well
it
stated.
doesn't make any sense for athletes not to.
Very well stated. I'm going to continue with the transfer portal. What impact is it having on the recruitment of high school athletes, especially the three-star athletes?
Well, I think they'll be prioritized differently. Schools might not be married to, not, I want to say lower starred, but like 3-star and lower. They might not be as married to those commits at the front end, at the early signing period. But on the back end, at the late signing period, there will be coaches scrambling to sign these guys. I mean, these guys will be wined and dined. They'll be treated like royalty. But I think, a lot of players that might have, committed early, they might have to wait a little bit and they might be deprioritized.
I read where a high school coach said that he had a three-star athlete that barely got recruited at all because coaches were recruiting more out of the transfer portal than they were the mid-level, mid-talented high school players. And it's interesting that is the case.
Well, I would just say that in that coach's respect, there are more 3-star recruits than any other.
True.
So, I mean, every 3-star isn't created the same. There are some 3-stars that are borderline 4-stars. Okay. That some coaches, like Nick Saban is notorious for going after, what's his name for the Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders? Jacobs, the running back. He was a 3-star from Oklahoma, from Norman, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma didn't recruit him. But
Michigan State football coach recruited some 2-stars and turned them into
true.
5-stars. So I understand that.
A lot of coaches can see talent beyond the star rating. But my point earlier is that coach said that that specific player might not have been getting recruited because of the transfer portal. It's possible he might have been a 3-star bordering on 2-star. A lot of times, player ratings, it's a fluid situation. Those things can always change.
Let me ask you a question. If the transfer portal existed years ago, how many years would Scottie Pippen have played with Central Arkansas, UCA?
I'm not entirely sure with that scenario, just because Scottie Pippen is my favorite basketball player. I've watched documentaries on him, and just knowing how close he was to his family, I'm not sure if he would want to have left that specific scenario. Well,
let's take it away from Scottie Pippen. Let's talk about an athlete in general with the skills of Scottie Pippen.
Like a Steph Curry.
And someone who got drafted from a mid-major or no-name school, got drafted as high as he did. How long would an athlete like that, in your mind, stay at that mid-major school?
I mean, I think it all depends. I mean, you have your Damian Lillards and your Steph Curry's guys. I think Damian Lillard, I think he's a guy that would have stayed at Weber State all 4 years just because of his loyalty. But I think there will be more people transferring. I mean, look at Maceo Teague at Presbyterian. I had no clue who he was when he was at Presbyterian. And he transferred to Baylor and has made a name for himself. If he doesn't make the NBA, he's definitely established himself as an overseas player. So I think some players I think it will increase the player movement. But just look at Ohio's player. I can't remember his last name, but his first name was Jason, the guy from Ohio. He's a junior, and he stayed at Ohio. He could have transferred.
Well, let's put it like this. As far as the impact to high school recruiting, the number of scholarships that a team is allowed to have, 13, is not changing. Mm-hmm. And if those 13 are coming more and more via transfers and things like that, well, I guess it's a wash. So I'm going to retract that statement. And I was going to say that there would be fewer recruits, but they would just be going to mid-major schools and fewer going to the power conference schools.
Well, I mean, that's true, but you also have to factor in people transferring down. That happens as well.
That's true.
It's not everyone just transferring up.
But if the number of transferring from mid-majors continue to rise, what impact would that have on mid-major schools themselves?
I think that will establish a discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots. I think that will make coaches at mid-major schools more willing to take lower level power conference school positions. I mean, you just saw Baylor win a national championship, which would have been unthinkable before Scott Drew arrived. And that's not even having to do with their the basketball scandal. Just independent of that, they had such a bad history. They were one of the worst schools in Power Five,
Okay.
and now they've won a championship. So I don't think you'll have as much of the Shaka Smart at VCU waiting for the perfect job or what he thought was a perfect job. Texas obviously ended up not being his perfect job, but he had opportunities to go anywhere and everywhere. Alabama was calling for him. I think UCLA at one point in time they want to interview him. The year that he went to the Final Four, they ended up just hiring Steve Alford instead. But I think coaches at mid-major schools will be less picky. They will jump at a chance to go to a Power Five school.
Okay. Well, do you see the possibility of mid-majors becoming a de facto farm club for the Power Six?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's the same case in coaching, so I imagine it would be a similar situation for the players.
I'm going to say this I'm going to just give it some really quick numbers. Baylor, two of their starters were transfers. Houston, four of their starters were transfer. Gonzaga, one of its starters was a transfer. And UCLA, one of its starters was a transfer. So of the four teams that made the Final Four, eight starters were transfers. Now, back specifically to the mid-majors, between Baylor and Houston, they had 10 transfers on their team. Of those 10 transfers, only 3 of them were from power conferences. 7 of them were from mid-majors. So I have a feeling that the mid-majors are going to be impacted tremendously by the transfer portal. Other than stating the obvious, and you may have already stated this, what are some disadvantages that coaches have with the transfer portal?
Well, for one, it just creates an added distraction. I mean, you have to recruit other teams' players for longer. You have to recruit your own players for longer. It's just an added variable which can easily be turned into a distraction. Other coaches are going to be texting your players, and you have to keep them. It also can lead to more apathetic fan bases. With so much player turnover, people might not be apathetic, but I don't know. They might not have that same feeling for players that they get to watch grow and develop.
That's true.
But then again, I mean, look at Arkansas. They had a bunch of transfers this year, and I think, winning cures a lot of ills. I think that team will be remembered incredibly well. I think J.D. Note, Jalen Tate.
I agree. Smith.
Justin Smith was huge.
A huge get from Indiana for Arkansas.
Yeah, they lost like 3 games all year with when he started, so maybe 4, but I can't. But yeah, I think winning will cure all ills, but there will be a lot of teams that get transfers that won't win.
True. Okay, what are some disadvantages that the transfer portal may have on an athlete?
Well, just in the realm of the sport, you're going to be recruited over. I mean, you might be recruited.
That may be an advantage rather than a disadvantage. Yeah, some people like being recruited.
You might be recruited over. Like
I understand.
You might think that you have a semi-secure position,
Gotcha.
and then a guy becomes available, and then you're out.
True.
And then you have to react, and you might want to have to leave after there are less opportunities. So,
right.
It's a situation where it might be like musical chairs or something, and you're like the last person left. So like that could be an issue for certain players. It could lead to more fragmented, teams and teams that didn't have the opportunity to develop chemistry and build.
Okay. Uh, some disadvantages, other disadvantages I see is the fact that once a player enter the transfer portal, that player loses financial aid from his current school. That to me, that's huge because if some other school does not pick up that player, that player no longer has financial aid in the form of a scholarship. And with so many athletes in the transfer portal, I've read that there was over 1,000, and I think that's all sports, not just basketball. But with so many athletes in the transfer portal, some athletes will end up not being picked up, and therefore basically give away their scholarship. So that's a huge consideration that athletes must uh, count on.
Yeah, that's definitely a risk that they take. And it also, outside of the sport, you're losing opportunities to potentially network,
True.
build relationships over a course of 4 years, and get opportunities, outside of sports.
Okay, well, with that being said, I want us to review some of the activity in the SEC and transfers, SEC and Big Ten transfer portals. Before I go there, though, I do want to mention the fact that the NCAA is granting a free year of eligibility to athletes due to COVID-19 pandemic. Given that they're doing that, and given that they are not increasing the number of scholarships, for instance, basketball teams will still have only 13 scholarships. However, they will get to keep any senior who wants to stay, plus recruiting from high school. How do you think that's going to impact incoming freshmen, high school freshmen?
I think it's going to create a bit of a congestion, but I don't think that that's going to be necessarily a huge deal. For the most part, I don't think a lot of seniors are going to be taking advantage of, at least at the high major level.
Okay.
Like Arkansas, I don't think anybody's coming back from Arkansas, for example, or Michigan.
Okay.
I know Shawnee Brown isn't. I know.
I know West Virginia has. I know an athlete that will be coming back.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's other, but that could be true. But if in the event that those athletes choose to stay, that means that there's one less scholarship for a freshman.
That is true.
Yeah. So now let's delve into the transfer portal activity, the basketball portal for Big Ten and SEC. Which conference you want to hit first?
It's up to you. We can dealer's choice. What do you prefer?
Okay. Since the SEC has the most, let's hit the SEC. We'll take them in alphabetical order. We'll try to be quick because we don't want to go too long in this. Alabama, they have two, and before I want to qualify the transfer portal is constantly changing every day. So what I give you now may not be the case tomorrow, but as of now, Alabama has two transfers in. They got a former McDonald's All-American from Texas Tech in Naimari Burnett.
Yeah.
And they also got a forward from Furman in Noah Guthrie. Tell me about Arkansas's transfers ends, JJ.
Sorry.
Chris Alik, am I pronouncing it right?
Sorry, I think it's pronounced Chris Likes. Yeah, they have mostly guards coming in. Chris Likes is a prototypical. He will be playing point guard. He's only 5'7". He's a guy that's averaged 11 points at Miami for his career. I think he's averaged about that every year at Miami. And they have a guy named Audice Toney from Pitt. He's a 6'6", versatile defender. He averaged 14 points for Pittsburgh. They didn't make the tournament last year, but he's very talented.
He was a 4-star in high school.
Yeah. And then they have a big scorer from a lower level conference. South Dakota's Stanley Amude.
Okay. And the ones that are leaving Arkansas, the transfers out?
Yeah, I don't know where Daddy Sills is going, but he will be missed. And Ethan Henderson is going to Texas A&M.
Okay. The Auburn transfers in. Auburn has one transfer in Walker Kelsler. Uh,
from North
he's
Carolina.
7-1 center from North Carolina.
Yeah,
Uh,
averaged out like 4 points a game last year, but he's a
Former McDonald All
yeah.
American. And Auburn is losing Justin Powell, Terrell Jones, and Javon Franklin. I want to mention Terrell Jones and Javon Franklin. They're both going to South Alabama. South, I have South Alabama seem to be getting a lot of transfers from power conferences down. They got 4 transfers from the SEC, and the 2 that they got from Alabama, they got 1 from LSU, Charles Manning, and they got 1 from Texas A&M, JJ Chandler. So I'm going to be interested to see how South Alabama will play with those transfers. And there may be other transfers from other schools outside the SEC that I don't know about.
Yeah. South Alabama's going to have a lot of high major talent. Now, can they all gel and come together? They all are transferring for a reason, so.
Okay. Florida has 4 newcomers coming in. Marion Jones, Brandon McKissick. Marion Jones transferred from Penn State. He was Penn State's leading scorer, I believe. He averaged 15.3 points per game, and he shot 39, almost 40% from the three-point line. So he should be a help for Florida. They also got Brandon McKissick, I said, from Missouri, Kansas City. They got C.J. Felder from Boston College and Philandris Fleming from Charleston. He was the Big South Defensive Player of the Year. They losing Noah Locke, Omar Payne, and Quay Glover. All together, I don't know if I want to go through each and every team. I'll just point out, I want to go to Kentucky and Missouri and A&M.
Yeah, let's bounce around a little bit.
Okay. Tell me about Kentucky.
Well, Kentucky's getting one of the best transfers on the market in Kellen Grady. He's a 24-year-old senior from Davidson. He's number 31. He went to Davidson because he wanted to emulate Stephen Curry, and that hasn't totally worked out, but he's had an illustrious career, I think averaging about 17 points a game at Davidson. He's been their primary initiator. He's oscillated between being their primary initiator and a prototypical 2 guard. And he said he wanted to emphasize coming off of screens and playing off ball at Kentucky. So he's an interesting player to watch, especially if Davion Mintz stays for Kentucky. And then they have Oscar Schwebe, who was, I think, a preseason All Big 12 first-team player. He's
from
West Virginia. He transferred from West Virginia. But he had issues with the coaching staff of Bob Huggins and Quinn in the middle of the year. And so he has talent, but he also might have a volatile personality. We'll see how well John Calipari does integrating him in. And speaking of volatile player personalities that quit in the middle of the year, that's the case for Cameron Fletcher, one of their outgoing transfers. He played, I think, in 1 game since Thanksgiving. He had some type of blow up with the coaching staff and went back home to California and left the team for a period of time before returning. Oh, I think he's from Missouri, so I don't think he went back. I don't know if he went back home to California. I think he went to California, but I know he's from Missouri. But he will be leaving.
And as of now, he is in the transfer portal. And as of now, he has not announced a new school.
Neither has their point guard Devin Askew, who will also be exiting Kentucky.
Okay, Missouri. And the reason I want to mention Missouri is because they had a boatload of people transfer out.
Yeah.
And they got 3 transfers in, and Amari Davis from Wisconsin Green Bay, and Jerron Coleman from Ball State, and DeJuan Gordon from Kansas State.
Yeah.
But I just want to make the fact that, man, I have at least 6 players that have transferred out of Kentucky. Only one, though, I'm sorry, out of Missouri. Only one has selected a team, and that's Mark Smith. He's going to Kansas State.
Although Xavier Penson might be going to LSU, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. I forgot. He did commit to LSU. So,
It's funny. Mark Smith is leaving for Kansas State, and DeJuan Gordon is leaving for Kansas State for Missouri. So they're just being traded for one.
They traded players. Yeah. South Carolina, I want to mention, has not any activity in the transfer portal, either coming in or going out. Tennessee stole a player from Auburn in Justin Powell, 6'5" shooting guard. But I want to get to Texas A&M because Texas A&M, and I also want to mention Vandy for a while. Texas A&M have 2 coming in and 3 going out. Ethan Henderson coming in from Arkansas. He's a 6'8" forward from Arkansas. This is coming in, and they're losing 3. So that's that. I want to point out the activity before we get to the Big Ten. And we're about to hit the Big Ten. The SEC has been extremely active in the transfer portal with over 21 from 10 teams coming in, and 36 from 12 teams coming out. So among 10 teams, they got 21 players coming in. That's a wrap for the SEC. Now we will hit the Big Ten. JJ, any particular school in the Big Ten you want to hit on first?
Let's start with Michigan State, since Michigan doesn't have any activity either going in or going out. I know Mark Rocket Watts is leaving Michigan State after a disappointing 2 seasons in East Lansing. And I know he's been in contact with Kentucky, but Kentucky's been in contact with Mac McClung and what's his name, Marcus Carr, some other high-profile guards. So who knows if Mark Rocket Watts will end up in Kentucky, but that's one of the schools that they've been talking about. Tyson Walker is a big-time get. He was one of the top 5 players in the transfer portal from Northeastern. He's a plug-and player. He's a plug-and-play player who's supposed to step right into the starting point guard spot.
One other player who is leaving Michigan State, Jack Hoiberg. Am I pronouncing his name correctly?
Hoiberg. Fred Hoiberg's son.
That's about to mention. He's the son of Nebraska's head basketball coach, Fred Hoiberg, and he's going to UT Arlington. The Big Ten is not very active at all. I will say, I want to get to Penn State. I just got to talk about Penn State. Penn State, as of right now, has no one coming in, but they have 7 people in the transfer portal. And 5 of them have already signed with other schools. So obviously, Penn State is going to have to get some talent from somewhere. Marion Jones has gone to Florida. Jamari Wheeler went to Ohio State. Trent Buttrick, went to UMass. Patrick Kell to Fordham, and Aaron Wheeler to St. John's. And the other 2 have not picked a team yet. But, man, what's going on at Penn State, JJ?
I don't know. They weren't supposed to have the coach that they currently have. Their coach got fired at the end of last season for after the investigation. Pat Chambers was some type of not racial misconduct, but he said something that was. It was similar to Greg McDermott at Creighton, but without the success of the NCAA tournament run. So he was let go. So I mean, they're a team in flux. I don't know if their interim coach is their permanent coach or not, but there's just a lot of uncertainty in Happy Valley.
Maryland has jumped into the transfer portal and got a couple of good players, at least one good player in the 6'11" center from Georgetown. I know Patrick Ewing tried his best to keep him. He talked to him several times, but he decided to go. I don't know why he was leaving, but I think he will help Maryland because Maryland did not have a true center most of the year. Yeah. And now they got Hodis Wahab. Close as I can get.
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine on that one.
Apologize. But The Big Ten has been very inactive. Only two teams with more than one player, and that's Maryland and Minnesota. There are six teams that have not touched the transfer portal at all, uh, whereas the SEC has 10 teams that have been actively involved, and they've gotten 21 recruits coming in, transfers coming in. The Big Ten is 11. Uh, anyone else, JJ, in the Big Ten? Any other school that you want to mention?
There's a couple of players I want to talk about.
Okay.
Al Durham, the guard from Indiana, going to Providence. I think that's a good fit. I think he's a guy that can score and didn't really shine in Bloomington, but I think under Ed Cooley, I think that's the guidance that he'll need. He's solid, if not dynamic, but he's a good player, and he's a player that we'll see. But Nate Reavers leaving Wisconsin was kind of surprising to me. I didn't anticipate that. He's arguably their best player this year, and I know they had a disappointing year down the stretch, but I'm kind of surprised to see him go.
Well, he doesn't have a school identified yet, so it's possible he will come back, but he is in the transfer portal.
Yeah, those in Madison, I'm sure, are desperately hoping that he elects to come back. But the number one transfer available is Marcus Carr, the point guard from Minnesota. After Richard Pitino was let go and resurfaced in New Mexico, that's the name I've been waiting to hear for. I want to see where he goes. I think wherever he goes could be a potential swing, like that could lead to a deep March run, depending on the school.
JJ, tell me, why is it that the Big Ten has been less active in the transfer portal than the SEC?
They have less reason to. I mean, they had a more successful regular season. Neither one had a spectacular postseason, but you had a lot of players get recognized. You had a lot of players get shine. I mean, I think the final 15 players for the National Player of the Year awards, like 5 or 6 of them were Big Ten players. It was regarded as the best conference. So even teams that had bad years were able to rationalize. I mean, the gauntlet that the regular season that they went through was. I just feel like.
Let me make a prediction.
Okay.
I predict that if the Big Ten does not become much more active in the transfer portal, their perch is going to drop a little bit. And a little bit and a little bit. It's just going to keep going because the transfer portal, while a lot of coaches don't like it and a lot of people don't like it, if you want to get better in a hurry, it's there. And if you don't take advantage of it, your competitors will.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way to look at it. I think it's situational. If you can retain your players, you can recruit well. Some players need the transfer. Some teams need the transfer portal more than others. Just like how in professional, some teams need free agency more than others. It just depends on how well you retain your players, how well you recruit, the system that you input. But I really. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the way you say retain your players, I look at Alabama. Alabama has lost no one to the transfer portal as of now. And they've gone in and gotten 2 people out of the transfer portal. So right now, this very day as we sit, there are 2 scholarships over the limit. I mean, 2 people got to go.
No, they're not. I mean, they have. Well,
okay, explain.
I know you said everyone has the opportunity to come back, all their seniors do, but Alabama seniors aren't coming back. John Petty, the guy who I think was their best player, is going to the NBA. Herb Jones, the guy who won SEC Player of the Year, is going to the NBA. Like, they're not. They were a senior led team.
Okay. We will see, but I'll put it like this though: you don't have, even if you retain your players, if you can upgrade through the transfer portal, coaches are going to do that. And then what's going to happen is this is going to force some guys out. Football coaches have done it for years in the SEC. They can't do it now as much as they used to. In the SEC, football coaches used to give 25, 35 scholarships, knowing that they could only keep 20 of them. This is kind of the way basketball is working, but not to those numbers, but percentage-wise, maybe so.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, but every transfer isn't an upgrade. Sometimes you just need a warm body. Like I know Arkansas, for example, is has three transfers coming in, but so does Minnesota. In Minnesota, the players that are coming in, they're all from lower divisions. They might be as good as the players leaving, but I don't think any of them are as good as Marcus Cart. I mean, it's a lot of unknowns. I think we're still in a situation where this is unknown. All right. Well, I think that's about all for this episode. Next time we'll be talking about the NBA draft and the way too early top 25s, or at least how the Big Ten and the SEC fits in. But that'll do it for this one.
That's a wrap. Thank you for joining us. Look forward for you joining us next time. Goodbye.
Bye.